What's up guys, manic.mercurian here. Today I'm going to be analyzing the hardest Mercury signs, ranking them in difficulty, and this is going to be kind of, it's not, I definitely want to make it clear that this is not ranking like the best to worst Mercury signs, like that would be kind of arbitrary. This is really more like the more difficult signs to have as a person, like natally, or you could also see it as transits, like which Mercury transits are the most difficult objectively, like for everyone. I've done this with Sun, Moon, and Rising already, so you can check out this playlist. I'll link it in the description, and if I'm feeling up to it, I'll link it above. I don't know. But yeah, you can check out those videos if you'd like. They're pretty popular, so I'm going to continue on. I don't know if this will be appealing to you guys, but I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there. So let's talk about the hardest Mercury signs. Okay, and I'm winging this. I haven't decided the order I'm going to go in. Let's start from Aries. Let's pick the conventional route. So starting from Aries, Aries Mercury, is that a difficult Mercury placement to have? Honestly, no, it's not. I feel like Aries is kind of a lucky sign in general. A lot of planets do fairly well there. And I have an interesting take on why I think Mercury in Aries is an easy placement. I mean, I don't know. I don't think this is too crazy or extreme, but I think a lot of people aren't aware of the planetary joys. Mercury's in joy in the first house. First house corresponds to Aries, so I sort of apply the joys to the signs as well. So it's almost like Mercury's in joy in Aries. It's a really fun placement to have, and the reason why is because Mercury is of course the intellect. I'm definitely not going to explain what Mercury is in every sign placement. But Mercury's the intellect, it's the communication. So in Aries, there's a lot of confident thinking, confident expression. We don't have to be bogged down by too many pointless details. Aries is very simple. It's black and white. Let's do it or let's not do it. If we're gonna do it, let's put all everything into it. So I think applying the Mercurian energy there, like the intellectual energy, in an Aries type of way, is very invigorating. There's a lot of action and activity, and Mercury is the mind, so the mind loves that activity, that it loves to have things happen, and it loves newness, and Aries brings a lot of newness because it loves exploring, and it's adventurous. So Mercury in Aries does pretty well. Someone with Mercury in Aries is going to be confident in their thinking, confident in their self-expression, and in my opinion, Mercury transiting through Aries is an easy transit as well. So Aries for Mercury is easy. Okay, let's do Taurus now. Taurus, my analysis may not be as interesting, I don't think. Taurus is kind of more practical, kind of middle of the road, more conventional. It is very logical. Taurus is a no-nonsense sign. It's not particularly super intellectual or analytical necessarily, but Taurus is very practical, and it's, it bases everything that it experiences off its senses. So Mercury does do pretty well there. From those attributes, someone with Mercury and Taurus is going to be very practical, very, no nonsense. They're going to be very realistic. So that's really great. That's definitely a strength. The only downside with Mercury and Taurus is that Taurus is very consistent, stable. It's not particularly super curious or experimental. And, Mercury is the mind. It loves exploring, or it loves being curious. So Mercury and Taurus, it's just not going to be as open to change or open to new ideas or seeking out new information necessarily. It's going to be kind of, a little bit complacent. So very practical, very logical, a little bit complacent though. So that's why Mercury and Taurus, kind of neutral. Excuse me. I'm going to have a drink actually. I'm going to be totally transparent with you guys. Alright. Next we have Mercury in Gemini. If you know your astrology, you already know probably where I'm going to put this. Mercury in Gemini is too easy, let's say, the easiest category, because Mercury is in domicile in Gemini. I know that's kind of a textbook answer, but that is what I believe. I go off of this, kind of more textbook approach in this circumstance. Mercury's in domicile in Gemini, so this is an easy transit. This is it's a natural transit. It's something that's easy to understand. Mercury is the intellect, and Gemini as a sign is very intellectual. It loves exploring information. It loves it loves trying new things, and there's a lot of activity with Gemini, so that stimulates the mind. There's lots of information. Gemini loves exchanging information, whether that be learning and listening, or speaking, and sharing information that was just discovered. So Gemini is kind of like the journalist sign in a way. So this is, it's exactly kind of fitting with much of what Mercury has to do with, and that's not a coincidence. It's because Mercury's in domicile in Gemini. One last thing about that. So Gemini in the northern hemisphere corresponds to the last part of spring, and there's a lot of change there. It's really the first time of the kind of natural year or the zodiac where there is so much change as we, begin to end spring and allude to summer. So again, that's kind of what translates to the change, the being open to new information and ideas that we have with Gemini. Okay, next is Cancer, and before I rank Cancer, I do want to say I think Mercury in Cancer is an underrated placement. I think that people with Mercury in Cancer can sometimes be surprisingly, or not surprisingly to me, but I think people don't give them credit for, they can be very wise, and wise in a surprisingly very practical way, almost kind of like an old person. They just have this kind of wisdom about them, this very practical everyday type of wisdom. So Mercury in Cancer is a really great placement. I am going to rank it hard though, mostly because Mercury again is the mind and the intellect, and it becomes more challenging when we evolve a lot of emotion. Cancer is probably the sign that deals with emotion more than any other sign. So when someone has Mercury in Cancer, they're gonna be, their intellect, their learning, their approach to information is gonna be a little bit construed or constrained with this lens of emotion, and that's totally fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a weakness. There's a lot of strength there, but what we're analyzing here is the hardest Mercury signs, and I do think that makes it more difficult having Mercury in Cancer, having Mercury in such an emotional sign, such a sensitive sign. Also, like I talked about with Taurus, with Cancer is very much focused on stability. It's more kind of defensive. It's kind of like retracting a little bit. And, Mercury typically likes to be, I don't know, the mental energy likes to be somewhat stable, but more open to change, open to new ideas, constantly consuming new information. So we just don't really see that with Cancer. There's not really that lineup, if that makes sense. Okay, next is Leo, and Mercury in Leo is kind of interesting. I'm actually going to put it in the neutral category. And to explain why, I'm going to take another drink first. Okay, so... okay, some people might fight me on this. Like modern astrologers, many of them will say that, many modern astrologers will say Mercury's exalted in Aquarius, and then that therefore means Mercury is in fall in Leo. I don't personally buy into that. I'm sorry, I just don't. And let me give you the pros and cons of Mercury in Leo. So let's do the cons first. So I think Leo is such a consistently fiery sign, right? It's fixed fire, so it's consistently fiery, it's consistently warm, spontaneous, impulsive, expressive. So that can be a downfall for Mercury, because Mercury is, again, it's the information, it's the intellect, and it's wanting to figure things out and improve things. And with Leo, everything is kind of, generally speaking, everything's sort of sunshiny, and it is that way in a consistent way. So a lot of times there's no need to really analyze, or Leo just says, I'm me, I'm who I am, I'm not changing for anybody, I'm awesome. And that's the beauty of Leo. It's the confidence, it's the the radiance. So again, there's just no need to analyze anything too much or try to figure anything out. So there's a huge disconnect there between how Mercury typically is and what Leo is. However, there is a huge plus side with Leo as well for Mercury. Leo is very open. It's very open to, being different, or different ideas, or, eccentricities. So I would say most people who have Mercury in Leo are not necessarily intellectual or open to getting really in depth into ideas or learning. However, there is a minority that I think it does flow very well. It does definitely work for Mercury to be in Leo, because they have this openness to the world. They have this openness to strange and unusual ideas. So Mercury in Leo can kind of result in truth seekers for sure. So anyway, so there's a lot advantageous for Mercury in Leo. There's a lot kind of challenging it as well. Overall, I would put it in neutral. Okay, next is Virgo. And this is pretty obvious, right? I mean, I don't know who you are that's listening to this. I don't know what your level of, like expertise is in astrology, but for Mercury and Virgo, Mercury rules Virgo. And not only does it rule Virgo, it's exalted in Virgo. So if I had another tier, I would put Mercury in Virgo even above Mercury in Gemini. Mercury is the only planet that is both in domicile as well as in exaltation in the same sign, in Virgo. So that means Mercury does more naturally, more strongly kind of in Virgo than any other planet does in any other sign. So this is kind of a big deal. The reason being is just because, again, Mercury's the intellect. It wants to learn. It wants to consume information. It wants to fix things. Virgo perfectly fits all that. Virgo is, practical and bases its observations on its physical surroundings like Taurus does, like an earth sign. That Virgo is an earth sign. But it's also mutable, so it's consistently, focused on changing, improving things, learning, figuring things out. It's skeptical. It's analytical. So really Virgo's kind of a perfect sign for Mercury. The only thing that's missing is Gemini's openness, or like the openness we talked about with Leo, or maybe Aries. So that's why Gemini is the yang expression of Mercury. Virgo is the yin expression. Gemini is more focused on consuming information. It has almost no, it doesn't discriminate the information it consumes. Virgo is the more skeptical, the more, constraining or picky, for lack of a better word, skeptical side of Mercury. But both Gemini and Virgo represent equal yet opposite components of what Mercury represents. The curiosity and openness of Gemini, but the skepticism and practicality of Virgo. Hopefully that makes sense, but Mercury and Virgo is easy. People with Mercury and Virgo are going to learn very readily. They're going to consume information. They're not just going to consume information, but they're going to be skeptical, and they're going to think, okay, why is this true though? Just because you're telling me something's true, that doesn't make it true. I need to actually make sure, does this make sense to me? They're going to be constantly processing information. So yeah, Virgo Mercury, it checks out. This is a very easy placement. Next is Libra, and this one is kind of interesting to me, whether we talk about people who have Mercury in Libra or when we pay attention to, what it feels like when Mercury is transiting through Libra. This to me is definitely an interesting one. On the one hand, Libra is a very intellectual sign. It's very detached. It's really excellent when it comes to learning and consuming information. So yeah, all that is textbook Mercury. That sounds really great. The only downside is Libra is so two-sided that when Mercury is in Libra, it can be almost overstimulated. Like, it constantly wants to shift back and forth. Is it this way? Is it that way? What is true? I don't know. I can see it from all angles. I can see it from both angles. I can see each person's side. And these are definitely strengths. Like, these are very interesting. These aspects provide a very interesting point of view, I think, for people who are experiencing Mercury in Libra energy. However, it does provide a little bit of difficulty because Mercury in Libra is not necessarily suited for arriving to a conclusion. It's more suited for a constant back and forth weighing pros and cons, etc., etc. So that's why I'm putting Mercury in Libra in the easy category. It is, pretty much as good as you can get without Mercury being in domicile or exaltation, but there are just, a couple things that don't exactly fit for Mercury in Libra. But overall, again, very intellectual placement. Definitely works very well. Okay, next is Mercury in Scorpio. This is super interesting to me as well. So this is another placement. I'm going to put it in the neutral category. I'm just going to tell you that right off the bat. There's a lot in my mind going for this placement, a lot of strengths and ease for this placement, but there's a lot going against it as well. I think this is actually an underrated Mercury placement as well. Because with Scorpio, well, let's start out with the cons first, because I think that's the more obvious part. So everyone knows Scorpio is an emotionally intense sign, right? It's all about extremes and things like that. It can be a little bit paranoid or cynical. And so those traits, can make it difficult to think objectively. In other words, they can make it difficult for Mercury to be in. People who have Mercury in Scorpio can have their logic kind of construed by their intense emotion, or by, sometimes like paranoia as well. So that does bump Mercury in Scorpio down a bit, I would say. However, on the plus side, and there's a huge plus side, Scorpio is not only very emotional and very instinctive and intuitive, it's also very analytical as well. I wouldn't say it's technically an intellectual sign, but it does rival the intellectual signs for its analytical ability. Also combining the emotional, psychic ability, the intuition, with logic and analytical ability makes Mercury and Scorpio excellent at debating and really, having deep understandings on things. So, I would say this may be like possibly the most interesting or kind of coolest Mercury placement. But again, that's not what we're looking at here. We're judging the hardest Mercury sign. So although it has many strengths, Mercury in Scorpio is, burdened, I think, by intense emotion. And with Mercury, we're just mostly analyzing the ability to analyze, basically. The logical process. So the logical process can be, I don't want to say constrained by the emotion, but because emotion has value in it as well. It's just that here, everything's about Mercury. Mercury's just about logic. It's about the mind. So having Mercury in an emotional sign can be very valuable. It's just also challenging. That's the whole thing. So anyway, Mercury in Scorpio, I will say, is neutral. Next is Sagittarius, and I really actually debated this one a lot in my mind before deciding what I would do with it, because technically I should have Mercury in Sagittarius at the hardest category, right? Because, just like I put Mercury in domicile in Gemini and Virgo, those are the easiest placements. Logic would have it that the detriment placements would be in the hardest category, but Mercury in Sagittarius is an intellectual sign. It's the centaur. It's part human, part beast, part horse. The horse part, or the animal part, means that it's emotional and it's instinctive. But the human part means it's rational as well. It's analytical. So this isn't the worst placement to have Mercury in. It's not the hardest necessarily. I mean, because Mercury in Sagittarius is going to be able to keep up with the analysis. It can sort of detach and reason and have really philosophical debates and kind of, have these, understand these really complex ideas. Sagittarius is all about philosophy. So one would think, of course, Sagittarius is an awesome sign for Mercury, right? But no, it's in detriment. Why is it in detriment? Because when Mercury's in Sagittarius, we don't necessarily have the ability to prioritize, or what's the word, like Mercury's all about deciding which is more important, or which is more true, which is the most rational option, and then kind of categorizing or prioritizing based on preferences and information, and how valid are these options available to me. And Sagittarius just doesn't really work like that. Sagittarius is more about living in the moment and viewing things more subjectively. It's about passion and emotion as well as intuition, or as well as intellect. So yes, Mercury in Sagittarius can be really excellent. And I think also, I do want to just throw out there, Mercury is in detriment in Sagittarius, and detriment placements are excellent at having a unique point of view, or a point of view that may be different from all the rest. I guess that's the same thing. But you get what I'm saying. So I definitely don't want to say I'm trashing these like hardest Mercury signs, because I personally enjoy them, and I enjoy them for the rich information that they have, which by Mercury's kind of definition, this is what is valued, is the rich kind of information. But again, none of that is what we're analyzing here. What we're analyzing is hardest placements for Mercury. So is it hardest? Yes, because Mercury in Sagittarius just isn't going to be able to know what exactly is true or what should I prioritize. Does that make sense? I hope I explained that well enough. If I didn't explain it well enough, comment below, and I do a pretty good job at responding to comments. So yeah, I could definitely clarify anything I say here. Anyway, moving on. Next is Capricorn. Capricorn, I feel like when analyzing Mercury in these placements, Capricorn is a lot like Taurus. Both are earth signs, both are represented by animals. So they're both earth signs, they're both very practical and no nonsense, so that kind of fits with Mercury, being a planet which deals with logic. But they're both ruled by animals, so that primarily they're both actually emotional. As practical as Taurus and Capricorn are, they run mostly off of emotion and intuition, which I know sounds kind of weird, but think about it. I think there's truth to that. So yeah, basically, I mean, I guess I just explained it. Capricorn is practical like Mercury, so that really works. But it's also surprisingly instinctive, more than I think we may realize. Also, again, similar to Taurus as well, Mercury and Capricorn isn't going to be, searching for new information. It's not going to be focused on constantly learning. That's just not what Capricorn's agenda is. Capricorn has goals for sure, but those goals aren't necessarily based all about learning just for the sake of learning. They're more about, they're more concrete. Like, let's build something. Let's, I don't know, attain a respectable rank, or let's, I don't know, change the world somehow, or build a company. I don't know, something like that. Again, Capricorn, it's not super intellectual. It's not all about like, let's just learn everything just to learn everything and, explore all these ideas. It's not that type of intellectual sign. So yes, very practical, very kind of skeptical. It has that healthy skepticism of like Scorpio or Virgo, but I think it just lacks that kind of curiosity or openness to information. I hope I'm not offending anybody. Anyway, moving on. Next is Aquarius, Mercury in Aquarius, which just like earlier, I'm sorry for that. Just like earlier in this video, I said some modern astrologers would say Mercury is exalted in Aquarius, so therefore they would put it up here. And I mean, yes, I'll give you Aquarius is very intellectual and it's focused on big ideas and like enlightenment and breakthroughs and things like that. But no, I'm not. I'm just not putting it in this too easy category. I'm gonna put it in the easy category for sure. I mean, obviously this is a really strong placement. People with Mercury and Aquarius are gonna be tuned into a lot of things. Like, does the information resonate? Is it true? Is it factual? Let's get the facts. Let's get the data. Let's get the science. What does everyone else think about this too? Let's like factor that in. How does that weigh with the information? What is the global consensus, or how does this information affect everything else? Aquarius has this great kind of holistic is the word I like to use, view on things. So this is really excellent for not only obtaining information. Aquarius is open to information to some extent. But also making sure that the information is like interesting. People with Mercury and Aquarius love to learn new things. But this is a big but, kind of. I mean, it's not that big, but Aquarius is fixed. So again, any of the fixed signs, they're not going to be super open to learning. In other words, people with Mercury and Aquarius are kind of stubborn. They like to learn a little bit until they have an idea, a narrative, like a worldview that works for them, and then they kind of commit to that, and then they're sold. Like, you can't convince them. And I think this can be a strength. Like, they can be very persuasive speakers. They can be great at persuading people or teaching. But when it comes to the constant and never-ending pursuit of knowledge, I don't know. I think Aquarius, it can definitely work. It's just, I don't think it's as fixated on constant learning as Gemini or Virgo are, if that makes sense. What else? Yeah, pretty much just that. I think Aquarius is more about helping people, kind of like Virgo. It's not just constantly analyzing. Like with Mercury's energy, I think there's a constant change going on. Mercury travels so fast, it's constantly going in and out of retrograde, it's going behind the sun, it's going in front of the sun, it's constantly moving around and changing. And Aquarius is kind of it is air, so it is mobile, it is adaptable, but it's fixed air, so it's a little bit slow to change. Aquarius deals with much longer cycles, it's ruled by Saturn. So there's that kind of disconnect with Mercury. So overall, it's definitely an easy Mercury sign to experience. One last thing. I'm kind of interrupting myself, but I guess one challenge too is Mercury really thrives with the signs right around summer. Around summer we have signs that deal with somewhat small picture or more mundane parts of reality. And when we get to these like later signs in the zodiac that are more around winter, they more have to do with really like obscure and kind of more worldwide themes. Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, they all have to do with like the world and spirituality and the government or law or things like this. And Mercury is the planet for like detail and short distance travel and small movements, little tidbits of information. So that's another kind of downside for Aquarius. Aquarius deals with like more monumental things, whereas Mercury deals with more kind of minutia, if that makes sense. So there is that kind of disconnect there. So anyway, long story short, Mercury and Aquarius I'm putting as easy. Okay, and last but not least, this should be pretty obvious, not only because I alluded to the placement of Pisces in previous like analyses that I just did, but also we have a big empty category here, the empty hardest category. I didn't even put Sagittarius here. I reserved the hardest category just for Pisces because, like I said before, Mercury is both in detriment as well as in fall in Pisces. I don't think I said that, but I kind of alluded to it. Just like how Mercury is in domicile and exalted in Virgo, no other planet has that. Mercury, on the flip side, is in fall and detriment in Pisces. No other planet is in fall and detriment in the same sign like Mercury is. So I would take that as meaning Mercury has a harder time in Pisces than any other planet does in any other sign. That's kind of a big deal. And again, like let's just go through what Mercury is one last time and apply it to Pisces, and then we'll wrap up this video. So Mercury is the intellect, it's learning, it's objective, it wants to find information. And with Pisces is not objective. Also, Mercury likes to take on a narrow focus and get detailed information, like I said. And with Pisces just isn't about that. Pisces wants to explore. It's very fluid. It wants to just take everything in. It feels everything. It doesn't discriminate at all. It doesn't have that kind of skepticism on, is this true, is this not true, or which thing should I prioritize? It just feels everything. And that's the beauty of Pisces. That's why Pisces has to do with spirituality. But when it comes to Mercury in Pisces, it can be very confusing. It doesn't know which direction to go. It doesn't know what to take on exactly. Also, like Sagittarius, Mercury in Pisces doesn't know how to prioritize. It feels everything so strongly, or it feels so subjectively that it has a hard time viewing things objectively, if that makes sense. So let's see what else. Oh, and one point I did want to make. So although Mercury in Pisces can be very confusing, it's very foggy, it's just very uncertain, it's very out of place there, very challenging for sure. I think Einstein has Mercury in Pisces. Mercury in Pisces can be very valuable, again, because like I said before, when you get these detriment or fall placements, you get individuality, you get uniqueness, you get a different point of view. And because Mercury is about learning and information, this suggests that people with Mercury in Sagittarius, but especially Mercury in Pisces, are going to be prone to coming up with really new or strange ideas or strange viewpoints, or exposing themselves to strange and unique information. So although Mercury in Pisces is probably the hardest one, it's also potentially the most interesting and kind of enriching, if that makes sense, or valuable in the sense that there's really unique information there. So I kind of just hyped it up at the end. But don't get me wrong, Mercury in Pisces is hard. It's rough. It's challenging. But anyway, that's my take on the Mercury, the hardest Mercury signs, I guess, is what I'm going to call this video. So yeah, if you like that, give this a thumbs up. Definitely helps me a lot. Subscribe, hit the bell notification, etc. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.